Give Kurt a warm welcome.
Thank you, Karen. Appreciate that very much. Welcome, everybody. I appreciate you coming to the session and giving me a chance to just kind of tell you about what we're doing at Central. And I'm happy to say I'm not an expert. I'm just a person that went down this road, and I think we're at a place where I can share it now with colleagues about what we're doing. I'm not here to convince anybody, although it'll probably feel like that. Sometimes the coach in me comes out and you'll feel some passion, but I really just want to show you what we're doing. I really want to try to serve this group and answer questions as we go. There is a lot of content, and that's why we're doing 2 sessions. With the assistant principals, I did it all in one. But with this group, I think it's more important to do it in 2. So this one, as Aaron said, is about mindset mainly, and looking at student experience and so on, and some data. And then this afternoon will be like more the how we apply it and so on. So a couple things here. The bit.ly.'s on there. If you can get to that, all the slides are live. It's exactly what you'll see. The link should be active. And then I've got a separate email account for, I got a lot of questions coming in from my last session. So SBG, just my name and SBG@gmail. That way when it comes in, I know that's the, it doesn't get lost in my other personal Gmail account. So if you'd like to use that. Also, my cell number's right there. You can call or text anytime, and usually I will be very responsive immediately. So again, as we begin, here's the bit.ly, and that'll be on the next couple slides. Also, there's a survey link. That's my own personal survey link. So I know AWSA does one, but if you would be so kind as to fill that out, I would really appreciate that feedback. Also, we found that it's helpful to have a parking lot for questions. So there's a link here. I won't go to that today during the session because our time probably won't allow for that. But if that link should be live in the bit.ly. You can go there, and what I've done since the last presentation is just go through that and answer questions for some of the assistant principals that were here when I have some time to really dig in and answer the questions correctly. So those are some things there that I'd like you to see. A little bit about myself. Paula, my wonderful bride, we've been married 26 years. Kennedy is our oldest. She graduated from Madison and is a nurse at UW-Madison Hospital. This is our son Will. He is going to graduate from Loras College in kinesiology. Loras is in Dubuque, and wants to be a pediatric physical therapist. So hopefully he can accomplish that. And then this is Griffin. He's our youngest. He's a sophomore at Stout in math and computer science. Other than being his mom's son, his claim to fame is that he published a book prior to his high school graduation called Over Earth. If you want to support Griff, Over Earth, you can find it anywhere just looking up his book. So Griffin wrote a book that was so long and hard for his dad to understand that I asked him to do far fewer words and fewer chapters, but he assured me he will not accommodate me. So, but we're real proud of him. Griff is actually, he fits into this storyline because I remember we were driving back from Central High School to a little town called Woodville where we live, and we were crossing the bridge through Baldwin and over into Woodville, and I remember commenting, he was a freshman when we moved to Central, and I said, boy, you're really in a high math, that's his thing, is math. And he said, Dad, if they had just told me about this like 6th grade, I could have done this work, but I didn't know about it. And that really kind of got me thinking about it, and it fits into just in general how we work with kids in our schools and getting them what they need. So that really stuck with me and has kind of helped me along as we've gone through this process. Prior to going to Central, I'm in there 5.5 years. This is year 6, obviously. I was at Merrill for 9 years and learned an awful lot about working with students, particularly students that had high needs, social emotional needs, and so on. So I've learned an awful lot there and really enjoyed my time there. And that's helped me be more empathetic to the needs of kids now. So again, there's those 2 links if you'd like them. That's my family. The only thing I think hasn't changed in the picture is my hairline. Now I'm looking at this, but I'm all right with that. So as we go through this first session and actually through the day, we want to frame our discussion and our conversation around this question. Does standards-based grading make sense for students? Does it make sense for all students? So as we go through this, and I'm going to try to challenge your thinking a little bit, but this is the framework of the presentation today and this all day today. Does it have a positive impact on students? Does it make sense for students, for all students? Obviously, I'm here presenting, so I'm going to make the case that it does. but we can have that conversation. So outcomes for today are fairly simple. I want to try to just show you what it is that we're doing. I want to maybe challenge your thinking on some things, or maybe you're just on board and agreeing and want to see how we're doing it. And I want you to leave here. This was the biggest thing. I want you to leave here with just some things that you can put your hands on. We have, in the next set of slides this afternoon, a ton of rubrics from all different departments. We'll look at assessments. We'll look at our how we use our proficiency levels. All that stuff is so that you can get to it and see it. And it's actual stuff that we're using now. I don't want to make this false claim or make it seem like this is just everything's perfect at Central, because it's not. Anytime we're dealing with human beings, myself included, bad days come and go, and there's always a challenge. So there are some staff members that still need to grow in this, but as a whole, it's really been a lot of progress has been made in the last 4 years or so. So my goal is to have you leave here with some great ideas for you to take back and be able to use. A little bit about the timeline. Just to jump through this quickly, 17 and 18, I got there in 16, 17. The summer before my second year, we are already elementary standards-based, and we were told middle and high school need to go standards-based. So I remember sitting in that meeting and saying to the superintendent, so my life's work has now become standards-based grading. Keep in mind, at that point, I had no idea what it was. So I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid from that day forward. It took time to get there. But I'll never forget that. It was a lot of reading and studying, and it was a lot of trying to, I feel like if I'm going to stand in front of the staff and answer questions, I better know more than they do, and that means a lot of hard work, right? A lot of reading, a lot of talking to people, but some really honest conversations with our music department that said, how are we supposed to do this in music? How are we supposed to evaluate kids in music? And what do semester exams look like? How can I do this in Phi-Ed class? We found some really neat connections. Who would have thought that the Spanish or world language department talking to music was a great connection? They have very similar issues. One is a first-year trumpet player is very similar to a first-year Spanish student because their standard is there, but we can't judge a first-year trumpet player on what a senior trumpet player looks like in that when you consider the fourth year, they should be really good. So there were some really neat connections there, and that helped us a lot. But even before I got there, I had the pleasure of taking over for a gentleman named Dr. Glenn Webb, who's the superintendent at Elmwood. Glenn started this work as a principal at Central. Over his 12 years, they started the mind shift of grading, and that's where it begins. And so that's where I'll start with the question. So without Glenn doing that work early, we would be further behind than where we are right now. So there's some warm-up questions, right? I try to reference everything that I have here because, as I mentioned, I'm not making this stuff up. I'm obviously taking it from people, testing it out and adapting it, working with our staff on what works for them, and so on. So I put those there for you as a reference. So just some warm-up questions. I'd like you to just think about it for just 5 seconds. What's your first reaction? I'm not going to ask you for your answer, but I would encourage you, if you have a group of people at the table, maybe kind of say what your answer might be. All right, question 1. Grades should or should not reflect behavior, effort, citizenship, or time management. Question 2. The role of final grades is or is not to teach students responsibility. Question 3. A final grade is or is not an accurate reflection of academic achievement. I wanted to put a traditional final grade in there, but let's just say, as we know, a traditional final grade is an accurate reflection of academic achievement. Question 4. Students should or should not repeatedly revise a project or essay until they meet the high standards of excellence set for it. Are they allowed to repeat it? Those are the questions that we need to think about. And your answers in your own mind will tell you kind of where you're at down this road of grading. There's 3 questions to consider, in my opinion. What is the purpose of school? What is our purpose as educators and building leaders? Now, you probably do the same thing at our school. All school staff are educators. Every one of them. And I'll use a great example. We have a staff recognition at the girls' basketball game or the boys' basketball game. This year, probably for the 5th year in a row, Pam, the person that checks the kids out at lunch, got selected as the staff member that this student wanted to honor. I believe that has to do with that mentality that the kids know we respect everybody as educators. And that didn't start with me. That was there when I got there. That was with Glenn. But I think that's important. So what is our purpose? And then, of course, while we're here, what is the purpose of grading? And that's a great question that you need to think about and talk about with your assistants and superintendent or whoever else. Well, what is the purpose of grading? I would argue that the purpose of grading, number one, is to provide feedback. Number one is to provide feedback to the student, to the parent, to us as educators, the teacher in the classroom, the school counselor, everybody, it's feedback. Document progress to show a student, show a parent, reaffirm what the teacher's doing, that they are moving from point A to point C. Not necessarily fast, but they're moving in that direction. Document the progress, and then inform instructional decisions. We have to use that information so we can place kids where they need to be, get them the help that they need, and so on. So those 3 things to me are the purpose of grading. Rick Wormley said this, and I love this quote. A grade is supposed to provide an accurate, keyword, undiluted indicator of a student's mastery of learning standards. My favorite 2 words in that is, that's it. Full stop. He doesn't cloud it with, yeah, but what if, or yeah, but. It's not, there's no yeah, buts. We give a clear indicator, undiluted, about what they know about that standard, what we've observed, and that's it. So our purpose dictates policies and practices. That's a quote from Tom Skusky. I really love that one too. It's on my wall in my office because it reminds me that we have to continue to go back and remember our why, our purpose. So my first year at Central, we did an exercise where all of our building leadership team members all of our collaborative teams spread out throughout the building, we asked them gave them a simple task. What key phrases or words would you use to describe what we do at Central? What do we do at Central? And so you can imagine, I mean, we only have like 40 teachers, but there's still a pile of little slips. So the BLT, building leadership team, sitting around the table in the conference room, we're sorting through and stacking them. And there's a lot of smarter people than me doing that, so I felt good about it. We came down to this. All those things fell into this one thing. 2 words, students first. That's what we try to live every day. Are we successful all the time? No. Do people have to call others out? Yes. And say, hey, that's not living up to students first. Now, the challenge is, yeah, but Kurt, staff matters too. Our mental, yeah, it matters really big. And that's important, right? But when it comes right down to it, if it doesn't strike at students first, why are we doing it? Why are we doing it? And certainly if it comes to a decision between, is it good for Kurt or is it good for students? We're going to go with it's good for students, so we're going to do that. So we did a Menti this year at an early PD and just said, tell me what students first means to you. When you look at these words, it ties right into what JC was talking about today. Kids belong. It's about relationships. It's about serving. It's the servant leadership. It's all those things. It's taking a back seat to serve the students. That's what student first means. And I bring that up because without that mentality, like I've had people ask me, well, how do you get to standards-based grading? The stuff we're doing this afternoon doesn't happen unless there's a culture that puts kids first and talks about relationships and has hard conversations with adults who blame kids for not achieving. So this is what they put. You can see those words, and we try to live that every single day. Like any place, sometimes we fall. So for us, our purpose is fair and accurate grading practices. Okay, that's Doug Reeves, right out of his stuff. Fair and accurate. We want to be student-focused in our process. You'll see that in our reassessment stuff this afternoon. We want to make sure it's learning for all. As we went forward, we really paid close attention to what the impact has been on for our special education students. Not just in how they perform academically, but how they feel about school. How they feel. We'll talk about self-efficacy in a little bit. This is a hard one. We measure and report academic achievement. not behaviors. Behaviors are taken out of the academic grade. They're still important. So it's a yes and, right? It's yes, academic grade should be about the academics, and behavior is important. How you behave, how you treat people is important. We're going to measure it, we're going to report it, and I will show that as well, how we do that this afternoon. But it is not factored in to the academic grade. So how do we prep the soil for change? First, we talked about we have to know our purpose. What is our why? We really have to have conversations about what that means in your building. Your building's different than mine. It's different than the person next to you. But we need to know that because your purpose will drive your beliefs will drive your structures, and your structures will drive your practices. If we don't have a structure, for example, a win period, we have a win period, that's wonderful. It is not a study hall. Okay, and so our structure is win. Our practice is what do we do in a win? Well, we have a way of getting kids where they need to be. We have expectations for the staff. We have expectations for the students. It's hard, right? And I've told many people this. If anybody in this room can design an RTI model that works in a typical high school where we don't have 15 interventionists and 7 people standing around waiting for something to do, you need to write a book and make $1 million because that is really, really difficult. And I think we would all agree that is really tough. But that's how we prep the soil. It starts with purpose. So what we're really talking about is a paradigm shift. As I started to go through this, I learned what first order change is and I learned what second order change is. And I'm a visual guy, right? I'm a coach by nature. That's what I love to do. So I need visual things, all right? My wife says, you're dumb, you need visual things. Okay, I'll take that. But anyway, so first order change, we're working within the existing structure. We're tinkering with the system. We're doing more or less of something else. So example of that would be a stop sign changed to a stop light. It's tinkering within the same system. There's really nothing different there. We go to the spot, we stop. We either wait for the light to change or we wait to see if it's clear when we take off. Or if some of you I know in this room just coast to the stop sign, and that's another option. But that's first order change. In terms of schools, here's an example I see all the time. We weight our percent, and this is in a traditional setting. 80% on your summative, 20% on your formative. Okay. Then it went to 85-15. Then it went to 90-10. Then it went to 95-5. And that is first order change. That's tinkering with the system. It's just simply manipulating the numbers. It is not a different way of thinking. Whereas second order change, we have to see the world in a different way. We have to challenge our assumptions and think about why do I believe that it's important that Tom gets done before Jeb? And if he gets done before Jeb, he gets a higher grade. Why do we think about it? We have to think about those things, challenge those assumptions. Working from a new or a different view. Best example I can come up with that at least made sense to me is a roundabout. Okay, my first roundabout I ever went through was in Appleton. I'm surprised I'm even out of it because I didn't know what was happening. I was just spinning around. Maybe you've experienced that. But the second order change is stop sign, stoplight is one way. Roundabout is a whole different way. Funny story, when I was in Merrill, Shannon will attest to this. So will Ryan. When we got our first roundabout in Merrill, kids would literally go up to the Walgreens that was looking down at it and they would watch it work. I think our driver's ed class went there and observed it. I really do. Shannon? Yeah. So anyway, it's a whole different way of looking at stuff. So we have to get to a place where our mindset has changed and we're looking at things from second order change. What that looks like is when a teacher goes, or one of us goes, oh yeah, that makes sense. Or something happens and they switch their mindset. This is one of the seminal videos that we use, that we came across. It's called My Foray, I don't even know what that word means, into standards-based grading. It's a physics teacher, I believe from Canada, who talks about the mentality of how he changed what he was doing to meet standards-based grading. This is one of the moments when many in the staff, including our math department, went, that makes sense. Okay, so I just want to share 4 minutes of this video with you.
We've all heard phrases like work smarter, not harder. But what does that mean for education? What does it mean for assessment? Let me introduce you to my foray into SBG, standards-based grading, also called skills-based grading or teaching-based assessment, and a variety of other terms. It's been around for a while, but I really want on anyone every step. I'd like to take a few minutes to show you what it is and how it works for me. First, let's consider a traditional assessment method. I teach physics, so I'll use the physics test as an example. If physics is not your thing, don't worry. So let's consider a physics test where a student earned a score of 72%. What does that mean? What information can you as a teacher learn about the student's strengths and weaknesses? What can the student learn about where they need to improve? Let's break it down a bit and look at where that number came from. On individual questions, the student got 3 out of 4, 2 out of 4, 5 out of 5, 3 out of 5, 5 out of 5, 0 out of 5 on question 6, ouch, 5 out of 5, 4 out of 6, 3 out of 5, and 5 out of 5. That gives us a little more information, but let's break it down a bit further. Look at what each question is actually assessing. Here's a list of the concepts and skills required for this test, and which questions they correspond to. So let's look at how this student did in each question. For question 1, they recognized that the question involved balanced forces with the free body diagram and numbers. Maybe the vectors weren't drawn to scale, they didn't use a ruler, or something like that. Question 2, they messed up on correctly calculating the net force, but given the value they came up with, they did correctly apply Newton's second law. Question 3, nice work on both Newton's second law and the free body diagram. Question 4, again, some problem with calculating net force, also a bit of trouble with the second law, but they applied the concepts correctly to calculate the weight of the object. Question 5, great. Question 6, this is an advanced problem that requires some experience and practice to solve, because there's implied variables and missing values and requires some mathematical manipulation. Clearly, this student does not know how to tackle this problem. But this question also involves friction, and because this student couldn't get that far in the question, this doesn't actually tell us whether or not they understood those concepts. Question 7, the application of weight and friction concepts. Question 8, whoops, I don't know applying friction concepts, they get the weight and balance forces concepts. Now, Untitled law of universal gravitation, 10 is perfect, 9 is minor errors. So we can see how the student's ability to apply these concepts produces the results we're reporting. But now that we've expanded it like this, we can see that scoring by question is not the only way to assess the results of this test. If we look horizontally across the piece, we get a picture not of how they did on each question, but how they did using each concept. This student clearly gets the concepts of balanced forces, Newton's third law, and weight near the Earth's surface. They pretty much get Newton's second law, free body diagrams, and universal gravitation. These are skills they can master with a bit more guidance and practice. What about friction? I'd say the student also pretty much gets how to work with friction concepts, but was unable to demonstrate that on question 6. Not because they didn't understand friction, but because they couldn't get that far in the question. The student clearly needs to work on net force calculation and advanced problem-solving techniques. So, what feedback can we give this student from a traditional marking scheme? You got 72%. Check the questions to see what you got wrong. But if we go the other way, from the horizontal, the skills or concepts-based approach, we could say, you know the Newton's third law, balance forces, and calculating weight really well. You need some more practice with free body diagrams, universal gravitation, and friction, but you understand the principles. Let's go over how to solve for net force, review vectors might be in order. Once we have those skills down, let's move on to more advanced problems. There's clearly a difference, and I would say that the skills information is more useful than the numerical scores on each question for both me and the student. Which leads to the question, can we use the skills as the basis of assessment rather than the individual question scores? And since this is a video all about standardized grading, you've probably already figured out the answer is yes. So let's convert our comments. I'm sure we've all heard the phrase.
So he goes into how they convert, and we don't do it that way, so I'm just going to move along to that. But that video, I don't know if you've seen that before or what your experience is, that is really powerful. Done in a way that it makes it easy to see and understand. I would strongly encourage you to show that to your staff and to your parents if you're so inclined. What I took from that is, and what we constantly try to look at is, asking teachers, is that a task that you're asking them to do, or are we teaching by standard? So if we teach to standard, we report by standard. There's no other way to do it. If you're asking a student to create a crossword puzzle, because that might show that they know something about something, but it's not tied to it's busy work, right? The kids, it's busy work. It doesn't, it's a task. It's not a standard. That causes problems. And those are the hardest conversations to have, because teaching and being an administrator is very personal. And so when you have conversations like that with teachers, is this important to complete because you want them to check the box as a task, or because they need to learn the standard? Those are the hardest conversations to have. So in very simple terms, and I'm not a bright person, standards-based grading is grading based on standards, right? It's that simple. You have to start with the standards. When we talk about standards-based grading, I really wish it was standards-based learning, because it's really way more about the learning than the grading, but it is what it is, and we call standards-based grading. Many places don't. Shimmer calls it learning all the time. But that's something, maybe it's another little mind shift. And again, this isn't necessarily for you, but it's something you can use, this entire slide deck, to put in front of people that struggle. It's not that complicated. I'm going to explain why. I would argue that teaching and learning is a natural process. When we pull away all the stuff that we have to deal with at school, requests for information, LGBTQ policy, or whatever it might be, somebody got in a fight at the football game Friday night, a parent's upset with you. We have kids that are out sick. We have staff that's out sick. Now the staff's back, but the kids out again. But we can't connect. RTI models that are broken all over the place because, quite frankly, in many high schools, we just don't have what we need to get there. When we peel all that back and we just focus on the teaching and learning process, I would oftentimes go early on in these conversations with staff and say, think about it if this was your child and they had to learn this. Using that framework, recognizing there's a whole bunch of other garbage that we deal with and they deal with as teachers. But if we peel that all away and say, if that was your kid sitting across from you and they had to learn this, how would you do it? It is as natural as anything we do. And that's what we're trying to create. That's where the systems and process comes in. So I would argue this, that the difference is, in a traditional setting, now this is an extreme, we're selecting talent, right? We're picking and choosing based on percentages, and did they show up on time, and did they smile at me, were they kind? All these things get thrown into the academic grade. And quite honestly, it's unfair to the student. But when we're working with our own children, we're doing this. That's what we're doing. And we have to make that, we have to create a space where that can happen in school more often than not. It's not going to be 100% because we do have dance teams going to state. Got to have an assembly on Friday before they leave. Yeah, I get that. That hurts the 8th-hour Spanish teacher because she can't get to what she wants. But when you pare it down, this is what we're trying to do with our own kids, inform and instruct. I use this analogy, and again, I'm a visual person. True story, my daughter Kennedy, you saw her, she's about 98 pounds soaking wet. She's leaving, she graduates from Merrill, we move to Woodville, she's with us in the summer. And she's gonna go to Madison, all right? She's a long way from dad. She has to learn how to change her tire, period. So what do? I inform her of the good news. We are gonna learn how to change a tire today, honey. All right, she was less than enthusiastic, but we went on to instruct that a little bit, like what does she need to know? Very transparent, I'm not hiding anything. I'm not tricking her. I'm trying to give her the tools she needs to be successful at changing her tire. And then we practice. And we practice as much as we can. She gives me feedback. Dad, stop it. Dad, you're pushing me. Dad, stop being mean. That's a mean thing you said. And I give her feedback too. Honey, remember, the tire needs to be on the ground when we try to loosen the lug, or it's just going to spin, and that's no good. So we give feedback to each other, right? Students give us feedback in the classroom all the time. Some of it's appropriate, some of it's not. But we stay in that practice feedback loop, Kennedy and I did, until we got it figured out. And eventually we did an assessment. Okay, honey, go. This is your turn. She did it. Some things went really well, some things didn't. We reported to each other what went well and what didn't. Dad, when you sighed, when I did that, that made me feel bad. I made a mistake and I knew it. You sighed. She gave me feedback. I gave her feedback. Okay, that's how it works. So then we stay in that cycle. Now we have some information. Now we reteach it and reassess it. Later on, we'll look at, it's logical, but there's a quote that I have coming up about if it's important to teach the first time, this will be this afternoon, How is it not important to reteach and reassess the second time? If it's not important enough to reteach and reassess, why are you teaching in the first place? So we did that. We reteach and reassess, and then we go and we inform each other again and so on. It's all, everybody's happy. Kennedy learned the standard of changing her tire. She can go to Madison, and she knows how to change her tire. She may not care, but I certainly care. The really good news is when she comes back at Thanksgiving to see her mom, we get to spiral back and make sure she remembers how to do it. That, to me, is the teaching and learning process. If you're a dog owner, think about trying to teach your dog to sit, stay, throw the dummy, go get the dummy, bring it back, sit, hold it in your mouth till I take it. It's the same process, right? It involves more treats, but it's the same process. So again, granted that I'm not saying that's easy to create in a school, but that's the goal, is to just focus in on that as much as we can. This is what we've come up with at Central. So our why, fair and accurate grading practices that illuminate what will be learned. I would never send my team into a game on Friday night without having them prepared for what was coming Friday night, at least to the best of my ability, right? What we do with students, 20 years ago when I was teaching health, I would be mad at that third period class, I'm embarrassed to say, and I would nail them on that test, right? I don't know if anybody wants to be honest. That's what I did. I remember that. I'm embarrassed by that right now. But we want to illuminate what they're going to learn. Success will be measured against the standards. That's how we're measuring success. And we'll utilize transparency and clear expectations for continued learning and growth. Lots of words. I don't ask the staff to memorize it, but I do ask them to live it, right? So going into this, there are 5 areas that we identified way back that we have to make sure, and I use bucket because I told parents at a very painful community parent meeting on the stage in the auditorium that we would fill all 5 of these buckets before we went forward with standards-based grading. So I had a lot of questions to answer because I was new to that. I didn't know the answers to some of these. But here's the things we got to do. Essential standards and non-can statements, rubrics and proficiency levels, assessments and reassessments, not just how you design it, but how you use it, right? All that blends in. Monumental things. Internal tracking. There's one this afternoon, a link to how our FIED teachers track their kids. It's pretty good. And then external reporting. What do the report cards look like? How do we communicate with parents? Hey, here's a news flash. We have to have cumulative GPAs. And this is one of the reasons I wanted to come and speak to you is this. What they say in the books about X, Y, and Z and how to run this runs into the reality that we live every day. I can't say, yes, they have a standard, or no, they don't. Thanks for coming. See you next year. We have to give them a grade. Okay, so we'll look at conversion, and it's not that complicated. We'll look at conversion this afternoon. From Shimmer, really somebody you should listen to and see his stuff and so on. But he says the most critical element of standards-based grading is just beginning the process. And I highlighted those words for a reason. Aligning standards is the same color for a reason. So that helps me, aligning standards. And so we align our teaching, assessment, and reporting to standards. That's all it is. What happens, guys, is exactly what this quote says. A learning-focused classroom, it'll be the side effect, it's an awesome way to say it, will be more authentic, meaningful relationships with students. We've seen that. We've seen our bad behaviors go down. We've seen more kids achieve academically. We've seen self-efficacy increase. They believe in themselves, including and especially our special education students. They believe it. They can do it. And I've got a video that Mike may be probably later, but I'm going to show you. But anyway, Shimmer's exactly right. I didn't go into it thinking, hey, this is going to be a side effect, but it became very clear, and it's all tied to the mentality and the mindset and so on. So when we started down this journey, I thought, well, standards-based grading, yeah, I can see how it helps kids, right, and parents. They understand what their students are doing or not doing. What I didn't know was how much it helps adults, how much it helps teachers, and I'll show you some quotes from teachers here in a bit. So just real quick, if we're going to do this, we've got to be reflective, progressive in a way that, meaning we have to reflect on our practices and see how we can get better. We've got to survey and actually listen to our kids. Don't take the survey questions that I give you from EE or whatever. Ask your own questions. How did we do on this unit or this standard? Where did I miss it? And let those kids tell you. It's kind of like what JC said this morning. Ask the kids. Don't ask me. Don't ask your colleague across the hall who's afraid to tell you the truth. Ask the kids. They'll tell you. And then be collaborative and transparent. Collaborative is a key part here, and transparent is a key part that ties to our collaborative teams, our PLC mentality. Oh, by the way, how does it attach to the first 4 questions? Easy cheesy. So to question 1, what do we want to know and be able to do? We focus on essential standards, on ICANNs, and on rubrics. How will we know they know it? Frequent formative checks for understanding, robust and timely feedback, and self-reporting. And I'll show you a single level rubric this afternoon that really is a game changer for kids learning about themselves and what they actually know and evaluate themselves. What we do if they already know, or if they didn't get it, we reteach and we reassess. Why? Because if that was my kid and they had to learn that standard, which we're saying is an essential standard, if it's not essential, don't teach it. If we're going to do that with our own kid, we have to reteach and reassess. Otherwise, why do it in the first place? And then what if they already know it? This one I struggle with. Enrichment for those kids that already have it. That's a tough one to do. It's a hard answer to give teachers. High school, we have an advantage because, well, guess what? You can take a class through CAP and UW-Oshkosh. Oh, AP class, you can do that. Trying to be creative with those types of things. So, but it all ties to the first 4 questions. This is our collaborative team agenda, okay? We always start with a connection because it's important that people share something that's cool, fun, or whatever in their life. We have to build that relationship within our collaborative team. Because if I don't know that your dog died and you feel bad about that, or that ice cream is important to you, or that your mom turned 90 and it's a really exciting time for your family, I can't be as close to you. I can't build as big of a greater relationship with you, and I can't call you out politely and respectfully when it needs to happen. So that is a critical. If we had a meeting that was only 20 minutes long, we would still stick to 10 minutes on the front end because it's that important. What it can't become is 10 minutes turns into 40 minutes of just, hey, let's talk about the weekend, okay? And there have been times when I walked into collaborative teams and it's like, we're 30 minutes in and you're talking about your dog going to the vet. What are we doing? And now those are really uncomfortable conversations, but they happen. So we break it down to this 40 minutes, and in our time frame, we focus on those questions. So different departments will do different things. And we do have singletons. We do have music with Fayed and arts. They'll go together sometimes. We'll flex different groups around. Not everybody has 4 math teachers or multiple teachers in the same department. That's okay. They're still talking about their stuff. So let's say it's my turn. What did I want students to learn in this unit or with this standard? How do I know if they learned it or not? And we have to get away from the feelsies. I have a couple teachers that, well, how do you know that they knew it? Well, I feel like, no, hang on. I asked you how you know, not how you feel. And that's an important conversation to have. But this framework ties directly to the first 4 questions, which ties directly to everything we do in SBG. And newsflash, what this is just good teaching. That's all that is. It's standards-based grading is not that complicated. The high school level, we get scared because the first thing parents say is, what's going to happen to scholarships? They won't have a GPA. And so early on, we had to say, wait a minute, we need to address that and talk about those things that are scary to parents. And if we do that and can answer them honestly and actually deliver what we said, we'll be all right. But here's some things I was doing just a quick study on our just these areas, but on when we were traditional grading, going back to when I first got there, even before, I looked at 3,451 traditional grades, and I looked at 4,500 in standards-based grades. What we saw was an increase in A's of 13%. We saw an increase in B's of almost 3%, a decrease in C's, D's, and F's. I really wish I would have segregated that. I didn't. I was just lazy. Okay, Packers might have lost. I was depressed, but I didn't do it. I should have, but a decrease by 5% there, and an increase in incompletes by almost 2%. Well, that's not very much. Well, it is when we look at the data, because look at with the standards-based grading is red, traditionals in blue, and differences in yellow. Well, in a traditional, we had less than 1% of our kids were getting an incomplete. So less than 1% of our kids that needed it were not given the chance to go, okay, bud, you didn't hit it. We got to do this again. We got to do this again. We got to keep working at it. So that jump from 0.93 to 2.82 is, I think it's a big jump. It doesn't look as big because the difference isn't as big, but it's a big number, right? And it's a big jump. So what that tells me is we've had kids who the door is not shut. The game is not over. We're going to continue to work with you on that. Now, some might say that, well, you just lightened the rigor. It's way easier for them, and I'll address that at the end of this slide deck. I would argue against that vehemently because I've been in the classrooms and seen it. But we're always working on rigor and what does a 4 actually look like and what does it mean. So impact on students and staff. Hattie's research, for those of you familiar, these are some stunning numbers. 1,800 meta-analysis looking at 80,000 studies addressing 300 million students. I guess that would be probably some data that we should pay attention to. And I don't want to insult your intelligence. I'm sure you've seen this. So at 0.4 and above is where we get more than a year's growth in their learning. So what are those things? Student self-efficacy, their belief that they can actually do the work, 0.92. Awesome. Well, 90% of our staff, and there's just a couple of people, but anyway, 90% of our staff say that it's had a positive impact. What we're doing has had a positive impact on student self-efficacy. Pretty good place to start. Here's a 2021 grad. Now, this young man was not a fan of standards-based grading. This young man wanted to make sure that if he had a 98, that he was the highest in the class, or that if I got a 98 first, and that kid had to reassess twice to get a 98, that he should have gotten a higher grade. It was a competitive thing the whole time. So he said behavior is removed from the grade. It comes down to strictly learning the material. He said there's some great things in standards-based grading. He's now in North Dakota State, and he is he's on the dean's list. His dad stopped me at the basketball game the other night and told me. Great kid. 2020 grad. I learned to focus on learning. In standards-based grading, it's not about memorizing. I could really learn it. Okay? And I'm not cherry picking. Okay, now this is my friend. She was in the office the other day, and she said, Mr. Soderberg, what are you doing? I'm working on my presentation. Oh, what's it about? Standards-based grading. Oh, and so I was on these slides. She's like, can I tell you what I think? I said, sure. She said, I love it. And I said, all right, cool. Can you put a slide in for me? I said, yeah, well, is that why you said I love it? She said, no, I do love it, but I want in here. And I also want my picture in there. So there it is. That's my friend. Yeah, she's awesome. And she knows I'm recording this, and she said, well, you promised me you'll do it. So I did. I actually woke up this morning thinking, should I take her picture off? Is that some sort of student violation? I took her name off, so that was probably good. So we want to talk about teaching with clarity, and the point is standards-based grading will teach with clarity. This also comes from Hattie's work. This is the book we're using with our math department to drive our scores. But clarity is around the teacher and the student, and I would argue, and the parent. That's the third piece of this that we forget sometimes. You send a rubric home, that parent has to be able to read it and understand it so they can help, right? And they need to know the what, the why, and what success looks like. So we go with our learning intentions, success criteria, that's the I can. This is nothing new. We've been doing learning intentions and I cans, success criteria for a long time, right? It's just good teaching. But when I put this in front of the staff is, hey, I've been in classrooms and I'm not hearing I cans being discussed. Don't believe me, have an argument with Hattie. This is the research. I need to see those in there. That's important. So the learning intention, I'm just going to buzz through this, obviously, is what we're going to do for that day, what we're trying to do. Success criteria is obviously specifically how they're going to show you at the end of the day what they learned. Okay, now end of the day might be day 2 of a unit for our family and consumer science class, right? It doesn't have to be that single day. But every day we're talking about how we're going to measure success, what we're doing and how we're going to measure success. And what we really try to put an emphasis this year is not the teacher reading it or writing it on a marker board, chicken scratch they can't see, but actually engaging the students in it. I was in a social studies classroom just last week. Awesome teacher. He had it embedded. He has his ICANs embedded in his slide deck. Okay, good for you. That's all right. But what he did, he went through the ICAN. He's got them all listed for their unit. He went through and used the ICAN as a review and led a discussion about what they've done already with this ICAN. And then what did we do with this ICAN? And what does that mean? And how does it apply to this one that we're working on today? I said, Chris, that was amazing because the kid's really locked in. And that's why he's a great teacher. And there's some examples of ICANs. So the idea is to create that transparency, right? Here's it is again. When we include learning intention and success criteria, the effect size is ginormous, 1.13. That 0.4 is a year's growth. 1.13 is huge. I don't know much about research and I don't know much about math, but I know that if the scale goes all the way to here, and we're already here, that's pretty good, right? So we share that with our staff. So I love this quote by Gusky. The simple idea of standards-based learning, notice the word learning in there, is to ensure transparency. And I would argue that clarity is what we focus on. That's the real, where you really, the rubber hits the road and you get your most gains, is just simply not hiding it from the kids. Like I did when I taught health 20 years ago. And that class made me mad and I nailed them on the test because I had trick questions and blah, 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 blah. We want to be really clear so they understand exactly what they're doing. Communicate the standards and how we're going to measure their success. So what are teachers saying? This is a business ed teacher, and I intentionally try to grab from different places. This is a highly respected teacher in our building. Help their self-efficacy overall and help me be a better teacher. The standards-based process. Again, veteran special education teacher. They have the opportunity to try again. Learning isn't time-bound. Okay, now there's practicality to that, right? And they believe they can learn. That's from a special education teacher, speaking about specifically about the kids she works closely with. ELA teacher, they're learning how to talk about their own learning. When I would coach a team, coach a basketball team, for example, and I would use terms like gap or jump or whatever it could be, and the kids I heard them talking in that same language as I was using, I knew we had something going, right? Same thing in the classroom. This English teacher told me when she hears her kids talk about their own learning, she knows she's being successful. And they advocate for their individual needs. It enables them to be better learners. Business ed, a different business ed teacher. Yes, we're blessed with two of them. Makes my assessments better and more focused. Students know exactly where they are at with standard versus just grade. Science. Students that are more in tune with what they know and don't know. That also speaks to relationship, like JC had talked about. I think it holds the kids more accountable. That'll come up later. I significantly prefer SBG to traditional. This teacher taught in traditional outside our district for 10 years and then came to us. And this is math. He talks about the reassessment. I'm a little concerned on time, so I'm just going to let you read that. You've got this whole deck. The one that I hang my hat on the most. This is a rock star ELA teachers. She said, more students learn more. That's all it said. Nothing else, just more students learn more. Love it. So if you go to Shimmer's work, he's got a whole list of, if we had more time, I'd have you actually do this, and I would encourage you to do it with your staff. So he's got all of these lists of grading descriptions. The average, punitives, no zeros, like practices that we do, right? And he wants you to place in a traditional standard-based mindset and then standard-based grading. Here's what it looks like. So you can see when you go here, there's punitive responses. It's about points and percentages. It's a single grade, which we still have a single grade because we have to, right? It's about all attributes. It's about their attitude, their behavior, their motivation, all that stuff is in one. And as you move up, you go, okay, standard-based mindset, incomplete. I'm using incompletes. Yep, check. No punitive responses, so a student doesn't turn in late or turns it in late. Doesn't mean they get percentage points off. We still judge the quality of that work by the quality of that work, and so on and so forth. So you can spend time on that if you'd like. And then we get up in here where you're separating attributes. In short term, we take the behavior out and we report on the academic. Separation of what they need to know and learn, separation of standards, and then define levels of performance. They need to know what they need to be able to do. So there's 5 myths that come from this article, this book rather, Grading from the Inside Out. Has anybody seen that book or read that book? It's by Shimmer. It's really good. I would encourage you to get in there and dig around because it's practical. It's like, okay, you're going to be asked this by a parent or a teacher, that one who sits up in the back right corner of staff meetings at Snipe, looks for options to Snipe. That person will ask these questions, right? So 5 myths about standard-based grading. Makes it easier for students. From the article, from the book, and from my own experience, I guarantee you more students will hit proficiency or higher, right? More of them will. They will provide authentic demonstrations of their learning. It won't be about a percentage. It's about how they did on creating a word search or a project that they brought from home that mom probably helped them with. Okay, I know my mom helped me with a whole lot of projects in my time. Or copying it down before school by my girlfriend's locker, right? Proficiency versus points. That kids can see that clear description of what they need to get proficiency or above. Mediocrity is not acceptable. I'm not talking about, I'm doing the very best that I can, Mr. Soderbergh. I really am. That's awesome. Thank you. We're going to celebrate that. We're talking about mediocrity. The kid who says, I'm just going to turn in garbage. Okay, because what's going to happen is I'm going to look at it and go, no, this isn't up to our standards. You're going to do it again. Now, that creates a whole bunch of messes, right? A whole bunch of fear and so on. But if you can set structures in place and practices in place, you can make that happen too. Kids learn very quickly that if I turn in garbage, garbage will be returned. They will step up to the plate, I promise you. And then we use the term not yet all the time. If a student says to me, I can't learn it, no, you haven't learned it yet, right? And that's a terminology we should use all the time. It's more work for the teacher. Yeah, it is more work than just to say, no, sorry, I'm not taking your late work. That's easier for the teacher. I'm going to use zeros because I'm going to penalize you because you turn it in late, so you get a 0, and then you'll take your punishment. That's easier for me as a teacher. Calculating averages we can talk about. That's out of the article or the book. But we do average some things. And to not allow reassessment. That's easier because it's less work for the teacher. So yeah, in that way it's more work. But efficiency for the teacher, rarely, if ever, and I would like you to look as you're walking around your building, look for this, is effective for students. If it's efficient for me as the adult, it's probably not as effective as it could be for the student. Easy for me, not effective for them. And then it's true, it's different work. It's not more work. In some ways, it's less work. And I'll show you that this afternoon when we get into assessments. New practices need new routines. So when we adjust, we have to work with staff and give them the time and the space to create new practices and new processes with their kids in their classrooms. There's only one way to implement standards-based grading. False. You need to look at your the nuances of your building, the nuances of your community, whatever that might be. For us, we are high-achieving AP in AP, right? That started before I got there and it continues. That is something people value in that community. Okay, they want us to hang signs, we'll do that. We're going to find a way to work with AP. I'll show you a bio example this afternoon. But there are no definitive rules other than fair and accurate grading and student-focused process. Local decisions, kind of a repeat of that or build off of that. What works for your school, St. Croix Central, may not work for Durand. That's okay. We're still focused on doing what's best for kids, right? We'll figure it out. I learned early on that we have to make sure, and this goes back to the other one, I have to honor other different departments have different needs. Math, the way they assess will not look like how ELA assesses. Hey, it never has. So we're not just going to make it be that way now. But there are some things we'll do. Universal goal is accurate grading. Students are no longer held accountable. Boy, I hear this one all the time. That is absolutely not true. You have to look at how you define accountability. Accountability typically in your mind means we're going to be punitive, we're going to punish, we're going to get some skin from them, which happens, right? That's a natural response. You did this, I'm going to do that. That's not what accountability means. We have to redefine that. Punishment is a 0, right? You got a 0 on that assignment, okay, in a traditional setting. Performance, that's what we want to look for. So their accountability piece is garbage in, garbage back to you. Here's the rubric, here's the expectation. Make sure that you're taking care of that. So we want to move from a task completion paradigm to a learning paradigm. Students will be unprepared for the real world. Not true. Oftentimes we think of the real world. Well, tell me about what the real world means to you. Oh, it's tough out there. It's cutthroat, heartless. They don't care. You got one chance to do it. Bull. That's not true. Google has proven there's most productive environments are ones that are accepting growth and time. They can grow over time. They're supportive. They're based on your strengths and so on and so forth. My wife was reading a book. That's one of the things that we do. I don't like to read. She loves to read, so she reads when we drive, right? She reads to me, and we're reading this book called High Five Habit, which is kind of a corny book, but it's got some good information in there. There's several places in there where they talk about this very thing. We were driving back from state dance, watching the Central Girls dance, and she was reading this book. And honey, you have to send me that, what study that was. And I didn't put it in here, but just it's overwhelming how much benefit comes from a supportive classroom, supportive, in this case, Google. It's not cutthroat and it's not heartless. It's trying to bring people along. The real world, when you look at it, is standards-based grading, and you can look at it all over the place. You need to look no further than how we evaluate our staff. EE, that's what our front line. It's, hey, hello, it's on a 4-point scale, and it's got rubrics in it. It defines what they need to do. How about this, driving test? There's not a one-shot deal at that. The bar exam, nope. Pilot's license, nope. My nephew was a Air Force pilot, flies F-16s. I said, Sam, tell me about, I'll tell you about standards-based grading, you tell me how it applies to flying an F-16. Oh, yeah, we have checklists, we have rubric, we have things that we have to do before we can even get in the plane. And what we do is we practice in a simulator. We don't just jump in a plane and go, well, let me give this a shot. They do all this, it just doesn't make sense. So when you bring that to staff, they want to talk about real world, that is a cop-out. That's a person, I'm sorry, no offense if that's something you thought, but it's a cop-out. It's not true, okay? Let's say, heaven forbid, my wife decides she figures out she can do better than me and she jumps in, right? I might have a second chance at somebody else, even in a marriage, you can try it again, right? Okay, sorry, that was a little folksy. Brain development, kids are not adults. So our conversations about adult reference things like, you'll never be anything if you don't learn to work hard. That's true, but are they ready to hear it? Research would say many kids are not. So the question is, what about college? We're not preparing them for college. That's not our task. Our task is to identify what they need to learn and be able to do to be successful in whatever they choose. Whether they want to be a great welder, they want to be a pianist, or they want to go to Harvard. Our job is to get them ready to learn and demonstrate that they can do that. And if what we're doing makes sense, if what we're doing has value to it and is valid, the rest will take care of itself. However, I would say that, as mentioned in grading from the inside out, there's a real granular nature to standards-based grading because it's about that standard and your performance on that standard. So students leave with a clearer picture of their academic proficiency and their behaviors and what they need to work on. So are they ready? So you have a student who's high proficiency. Kid gets it. We've all had them. They don't even need to come to school and they can pass stuff, but they just socially can't get there. They don't want to be there. They don't do well. They underachieve because of that. That student needs to be, they know their high proficiency. They also need to be aware that their low attributes, attention, effort, focus, they need to pay attention to that and keep working on it. But that's not going to impact how we say they know or don't know their physics information. When they go to college, they'll either adjust to this and jack this up, or unfortunately, they'll fail. And they'll have to find something else to do. Low proficiency, high attributes, those are the hard workers, right? They can do it. They're going to show up. Good morning, Mr. Soderberg. Man, you look great today. Okay, thank you very much. Smiling, turn their stuff in on time, work hard, stay after those kids. But they may be low proficiency. They have the same thing, just in reverse. They go to college, they know they're going to have to focus on the proficiency. They're going to have to lean on their high attributes to do better in proficiency. This kid's going to have to develop some attributes to be able to support his high proficiency, because at some point down the line, it's just not going to be good enough. Here's the bottom line. Humans adjust and grow to meet demands. We adjust and grow to meet demands all the time. I use this example with kids in college or job or whatever. Hey, have you ever been up at 4 in the morning to milk cows? Of course, I use it on kids. I know it's never done that. No, I've never been up at 4 in the morning to milk cows. Well, what if I told you that you could get a job at a farm right down the road, but you had to be there at 4 in the morning to milk cows, and they would pay you all kinds. You get $50 an hour. Would you show up at 4 in the morning to milk cows? Absolutely. Okay. But you've never been up at 4 in the morning. So what? You get the point? We adjust. Well, Mr. Soderberg, when the kids go to college, they're going to have multiple choice tests. Okay, and what's your point? So what? They won't get to reassess. Okay, they will adjust and grow and they will understand. Bottom line is, in my opinion, our job is to prepare them to learn about themselves, to good as they can at the standards you and I have deemed essential to be able to perform those in multiple different places at a high level, and they'll adjust all of that. Man, I played in high school basketball, all we did was run and gun, baby. Now I'm playing for a guy who makes us walk it up. Okay, what do? I walk it up. I mean, it's just, there's so many analogies like, and I only say that because you will hear that from staff. Oh, but there's one more, sorry, that gives me, we have 15 minutes. One other thing, standards-based grading is too subjective. Do this with your staff when you hear that. And I don't care if it's about standards-based grading or not. All right, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna do some math. We're gonna take a 10-year veteran. And that 10-year veteran has seen about 150 students per semester. For 2 semesters, that's 300 students a year. Can we agree on that? Good. I made Tom check the math last night. And so if it's wrong, it's this. So that's 300 students and 8 items of evidence, not assignments or tasks, but I'm talking items of evidence of their learning of the standard over that year. That's 2,400 items of evidence per year. Okay? Well, staff, that's 24,000 items of evidence that you have seen as a teacher in your 10-year career. Now, if you don't think those numbers are right, like, wow, come on, I don't see 300. Okay, switch the numbers. I don't care. Let's say it's 10,000. Say it's 5,000. I don't care. That's a lot. So you've got that individually, plus to compare everybody's stuff to that gets turned in, the garbage in, garbage out thing. You've also probably got a building full of colleagues that have also seen stuff. So now we take my 24,000 plus your 24,000. Now that's 48,000. So if I go to a colleague, let's say it's in my English department, we're colleagues, and I say, hey, Sue, can you take a look at this? What do you think of that? Now we got 48,000 items of evidence that we've used to filter this thing and go, well, that's a 3. That's not a 4. Because that will be the challenge. Will be, wait a minute, what's a 3 and what's a 4? And how do I make that differentiation? It's so subjective, Mr. Soderberg. No, it's not. It is absolutely not. What it is, however, is professional judgment. Professional judgment. So we talk about with our staff all the time about you have to use your professional judgment with common sense, understanding that kid's story to make a decision on what the best action is for them to be able to learn the content. That is probably one of the most powerful things that we can put in front of parents and in front of teachers. What this tells teachers too, by the way, when you tell them this is, I believe in you. I believe in you. Do it with a second-year teacher. Change the numbers. I believe in you. You've seen this. Not to mention, you went to college. You turned in your own stuff. You knew it was garbage when you turned it in. You knew when you went out too late on Thursday night and had to turn it in on Friday morning. Oh my God, I forgot or whatever. You knew it was garbage. So you can compare things. I mean, it's crazy to think otherwise, in my opinion. So that tells them that you believe in them, and to gives them that freedom to use their professional judgment. So before we go to the questions, I just want to go back to this opening question. When you think about all the stuff we just went through, and that's all about mindset, it's very little about practice, right? It weaves in there, but it's very little about practice. In your own mind, how do you answer that question? Does SBG serve in the best interest of students? All students. Now, part of this, granted, you're taking my word for what I'm telling you. You saw the data and you might have questions about, wait a minute, I have questions about this or that. And there'll be other questions about, well, what about this kid or what about that kid? But in general, when you think about that, I think it's hard to answer anything but SBG is good for kids. And I can tell you it's good for adults as well. But that's for you to decide, for you to think about. So these were the things that we wanted to accomplish, at least in part today. I wanted you to leave with the key understanding of the philosophy, the mindset of what standard-based grading is. And I wanted to open you up to the conversation about your grading practices. This afternoon, we'll go through that number 3. But I also want to encourage you, because I've had people come up to me, even since I've been here, and say, we're getting there, we're trying, it is scary, right? Because it's a big thing to try to move. I would encourage you to be brave, to be courageous, because it's what's best for kids, and the staff will find out what's best for staff too. My goal with this first session was to give you all the weapons you need, the resources you need to be able to have conversations with people to whatever level you want to. The other thing I would encourage you is when someone says, yeah, we're standards-based, ask them some questions and start with their philosophy on grading. Because if it's not lined up with that, just because you're using a 0 to 4 rubric or a 5 to 8 rubric or whatever you want to call it, just because you're giving out checklists does not mean it's standards-based grading. So hopefully that we've reached those things. Here are some of the very best, and for whatever reason I couldn't find my grading from Inside Out book, but it should be on. Oh yeah, here it is. Found it. So these are the things. Standards-based grading in action. This is a Shimmer book and others. That is huge. It's a great book because it's focused on secondary. It's focused on high school level. Really important that you look at that. This was another one. And it's funny because these are kind of like, as I needed them, I found them. So this one on rubrics. Susan Brookhart is great on rubrics. You have to be an expert on rubrics. It's kind of we've been doing these a long time. I've had teachers search on the internet and find rubrics, and I say, come on, where did you get this? Because this is not our design of a rubric. I'll go over that this afternoon. And it's not what you're teaching in class. You can't just fit it into what you're doing. You need to create it. And like anything, as they get better at it, it becomes easier and easier. And I'll show that this afternoon. Another good one here by Marzano on formative assessments. Obviously, I spent a lot of time with this one. This is Myron Dweck is one that was, I think, maybe the oldest on here. And then this one, What We Know About Grading, is a really good Daskowski's book, one of his books. Matt Townsley, if you don't know him, he's a young guy, was in Iowa, and Iowa is big with standards-based grading at the secondary and high school level. He is now a professor at Northern Iowa. He's as accessible as my mom. I mean, I call him and he answers, right? Not because I'm nobody. He calls and answers because that's what he does. He has a passion about this. And I would encourage you, I've got his websites and such listed to go find them and look at their websites. I should have included on this, I didn't, but at the end of the second session, there's a list of all these links to their websites and so on and so forth. I will go in after we're done, and I'll copy that and put it in this slide deck as well. So if you can't be here this afternoon, you'll have that in there as well. So the goal was to give you resources, and hopefully this will help with that. At this point, just a reminder about the survey link. If you could do that, that'd be great. If you have questions that you want, send me directly. There it is. At this time, I'd love to answer any questions that you might have. I think we have about 5 minutes left. Jeff.
Well, this may be misinformation. I had heard my understanding was that kind of the first take to the board wasn't accepted readily, and I guess my question is, obviously that didn't stop the process. So what kind of turned the board for the community or whatever the goal?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So in the spring of that, so we found out that summer that we're doing it, and in the spring we had a community meeting, and it was brutal, guys. I mean, it was tough questions, and I was standing up there trying to answer these questions I didn't know about, and I left there, and my typical response would be, I gotta get a little better. So I went to learn it. So then you answer those tough questions, and then as you present to the board, it gets better and better. The board had the same question, like probably many of your boards. They have kids at the high school or in the middle school that are coming up, whatever. They want to know what's going to happen with GPA, cumulative GPA, what's going to happen with scholarships. So as we were able to address those questions with the board, they came on really quickly. But that is a very fair question, because after the performance of our entire admin team on that night in the spring of 2017, 2018, we needed to get our stuff in a row, and that's what happened. So it was just educating the board about it as well. Thank you. That's a really good place. I never talked about the board. Other things? Yeah.
We're looking at moving towards secondary grading within a couple of years. I just started as principal this year, but it looks like the path we're on right now is that we'll do some grade consistency fixes this year. After the year, and say, for instance, we're not doing extra credit, except work up until some assessment. Those things that make it grade correctly, but it's still above grade, has some big flaws. And then move towards everybody's grades, pilot classes, and then hopefully is the policy test in a couple years. Is there anything you recommend? Does that path make sense?
Yeah, that's the right track. It's got to start with your grading, and you've got to start to break down those barriers and get the mindset different. Because if you don't have that, you can't go anywhere else. So I would spend as much time as you need on that. When I replaced Glenn, he had done a lot of that work, and it took 3, 4, 5 years for him, and they were working through it. So I would be patient with that. But that's why hopefully some of the things that are in this slide deck, you can just cut and paste to yours and say, here's why it makes sense. But there's going to be some arguments about, like this afternoon, the first thing right out of the gate, we'll talk about our 10 grading practices. And I'll give you an assessment that we use for how our collaborative teams assess themselves and where they are with each one of those. We had a really interesting activity, 10 grading practices in the library. So they all started in the middle, and we said, philosophically, if you believe in this, go to the right. If you do not believe in this specific one, no extra credit, would say, go to the left. If you don't believe in that philosophically, okay? That was a great discussion. All right, come back to the middle. Now, no matter what that was, if you're actually doing that, not giving extra credit, go to the right. If you're giving extra credit, go to the left. That takes a lot of trust when your administrator says, prove to me that, or just show me that you're not doing what we're asking you to do. But it was great discussion. And that, I would encourage you to just kind of stick right in that. You're on the right track for sure. The other thing I would add is, as you go through, what makes this the most challenging, I think, is moving people along, getting your early adopters to feel success. So you're going to focus on them. Forget about the naysayers. Focus on them. Have them develop success. They'll talk to their colleagues. It's like network marketing. They'll say, hey, look what I'm doing. Highlight them at staff meetings if you feel comfortable, if they feel comfortable with that. Building that belief in what they're actually doing. Because when your rock star goes to people in the teacher's lounge, it says, look at this assessment. There's 4 questions on it. Look at my old assessment. There's 45 questions on it. This would take me days to grade. This one, they leave the classroom literally knowing how they did. Or we also do delayed grading. But those are the things, is meeting people where they are, is something that I find to be challenging and fun, because I'm from a world where in my own home with my dad and mom, it's, well, I told you to do it, so that's what you're going to do, and you're going to figure it out. That doesn't work in a school, come to find out. You actually have to work with people. So that's a challenge. It's to go slow to go fast. Take care of yourself. Be careful that you're not pushing too far, too hard, too fast. The challenge might come from when you've got a board member or a supervisor of yours saying, we need to do this now, and it needs to be done by whatever. That's why those 5 buckets were important. I had to stand at the next meeting in front of parents and say, we're not going forward unless this happens, unless we are able to fill these buckets. So, great questions. Other ones? Yeah. Yeah, lots and lots, and that also started with Glenn prior to me, and then it just continued, right? And we, I think the new English standards are out, and FIED has new standards now, so there's always that revamp of some kind. But we look at those every fall. We look at what the standards are. I trust them to pick out the essentials. I look over it, approve it, and gets the district office. Then it goes in our grade book. But I saw a hand back. Yeah.
You mentioned before, we get that benefit of, placing kids in the advanced environments that you need your cap.
Right.
So within those cap agreements, those credit agreements, we find universities, where we do that, we just not doing standard-based of the university's program.
No, we use standards-based. Yeah.
Do the standard-based and then transfer.
Yeah, it was so we were all excited we're going to partner with Oshkosh. We signed the docs, and then it's like, wait a minute, they're asking us, what is this 0 to 4 stuff? And so I had to show them how we convert, and it hasn't been a problem since.
GB was totally on board.
GB Oshkosh, yeah. Now we're starting to partner with RF because River Falls, because we're just down the road from them too. And it's the exact same conversation. It's like, we're okay. This time I can tell them, call your friends at Oshkosh if you have questions. But yeah, no, it works out.
Is that the same with the textbook agreement?
Yeah, we have a technical math class that we teach that we have to get to their standards, but how we grade them is how we grade them. Good question. Others? Good.
I'm just gonna thank Kurt for all of his information. It's so good. If you have some other questions that you want to ask him and come to the second session, the resources are so amazing. So we thank him and let's give him a warm welcome.
Thank you for attending. If you have, I'll hang around if you have anything you want to chat about.
I'll just find that.
That's,
It's some really important things you can use with your staff. I love to. Oh, they're amazingly.